You know what would be great right now? Infrastructure Week. Seriously, I'm not even kidding. You know how it felt like every other week someone would announce that this was Infrastructure Week, regardless of what that meant? It often didn't mean much of anything. As a matter of fact, I don't know if it ever meant anything, but for a while there'd be stuff in the news. Oh, it's Infrastructure Week again. Second time this month. Hey, what are they distracting us from this time? That's totally how they talk in my head. But what is infrastructure? I mean, aside from an incredibly sexy word. If you think about it at all, you might think of infrastructure as the stuff that might not be run by any one company, but that keeps society moving along. Things like roads and streetlights, the water systems, the electrical grid, trash and waste collection, sewage, our communications network, mass transit, maybe police and fire and ambulances. I mean, that's all infrastructure, sure. But if one thing has become clear in the last month or two since all this went down, it's that infrastructure covers so much more than that. We depend on it in a much more naked and direct way than we maybe sometimes think about, especially now. Sure, we depend on public works to keep working, but it's certainly more than that. You don't have to work for the government or even a government adjacent operation to contribute something valuable and necessary to the infrastructure of our society. It's also warehouse workers who fill the packages that a truck or a train or a boat brings from the factory to the delivery person, who then brings it to your door, which you don't open until they leave because nobody wants that. It's research scientists who are constantly looking for ways to deal with the everyday problems of the world, as well as the great problems that suddenly spring up, like that ever happens. Then they actually help science or technology or just basic logistics move forward. It's the volunteers at crisis shelters and food banks and community gardens and other public spaces. It's mental health care for people who aren't covered by insurance. It's the people who do for the least of us what the world needs to do for all of us. It's the people who do childcare and elder care and care for the disabled and other people who need a little more care than a cruel world can often provide. These workers, often unthanked, unpaid, unnoticed, are the last line of defense for so much of what we take for granted now. If the chain breaks in any of those industries right now, there's not a lot we can do about it, and a lot more people will fall through the cracks than have already done so. And that's already happening. If you're lucky enough to be able to give something, money, time, supplies, attention, give it. We are greater than the sum of our parts, and when we work together, we can build a society out of all this infrastructure. If you interact with someone outside your home and they give you something you couldn't get for yourself, think for a second about how they got to a place where they could get you what you needed. And then think about what you can do to help them or someone else. It's tough right now, what with not being able to leave the house, but your attention is a valuable resource, and our collective attention can bring us out of this crisis into something better. In fact, it's the only thing that can do that. Think about the water coming into your house. Think about the internet you're watching this on. Think about the food you're eating, the electricity that keeps everything running, the building codes that allow you to feel secure in your space. You don't need to feel grateful for everything every minute of the day. That would be exhausting. But every once in a while, it's a good exercise to stop and think about the infrastructure that allows the thing that you have, that you use, that you see and read and partake in and of, to be in your life. I kind of think the basic infrastructure of New York City, where I live, the water systems, the electrical grid, the subways, the bridges and tunnels and structures that allow people to flow around the city to their jobs and their fun places and their homes and the parks and the airports and everywhere else, as flawed as it all is, that network of interconnected things is the greatest collective feat of engineering that modern humanity has ever created. In my mind, it rivals the creation of the pyramids or of any of the other great wonders of the world. It's a tiny archipelago with so many people, so much going on, so many processes and so many disciplines created over centuries that fit together more or less pretty well and more or less work like they should. Among all the other things it is, New York City is a masterpiece of engineering. But it's not just New York. Things are more densely packed here, but infrastructure is everywhere. It's where you are for sure. I think it's good and important to celebrate that, but just as importantly, especially right now, when there's less of a net underneath us than usual, I think it's just as crucial to notice it. Just appreciate it and pay attention to it and be aware of how much we need it every day, all the time. It needs to be kept up, and we haven't really kept it up, and now we're suffering for that. But we can fix it a little at a time. Think about how. Don't get overwhelmed. Just do what you can. That's all you can ever do is what you can. Do what you can.